Building your business was hard, and you only sell it once. With a focus on marketing, communications, digital, and service businesses, the TobinLeff M&A advisory team is dedicated to helping owners maximize and monetize their life's work. Welcome to the TobinLeff M&A podcast.
Welcome. Hi, I'm David Tobin from TobinLeff. I am pleased to be joined by four of my partners, Janet Tyler, Chuck Gottschalk, Mary McKinney Flaherty, and Roy Page. We are 5 of the 8 partners from TobinLeff, here to share with you some of our experiences around the topic, lessons learned to help owners sell their companies, lessons learned from our travels to help owners monetize their business interests. TobinLeff, we started the firm 15 years ago. We've had the privilege to work with many owners, craft exit plans, sell their companies to both strategic and financial sponsors. We just want to have a discussion to share with you from our journeys, our perspective, what we would hope somebody would share with us if we were in your shoes thinking about selling. So with that, partners, who wants to go first? Lessons learned to help somebody sell their company.
I'll dive on it first.
All right.
My area is easy. So I'm Chuck Gottschalk, as David said, and I'm a CPA by background. So I'm the numbers guy. And I have a very objective view of what goes on. And I will say, focus on your balance sheet. Everybody wants to talk about the P&L. If you're going to go to market, focus on your balance sheet. It's a lot easier to understand in many ways, has much fewer accounts. And you actually might improve your P&L by looking at your balance sheet, because we see it all the time where accounts have not been properly reconciled. So if you're going to go to market, focus on your balance sheet. One, it might improve your P&L, but even if it makes your P&L worse, at least you know exactly what you are making. And then when you go to market, there won't be a surprise, because getting your earnings correct is critical to getting across the goal line and getting deals done. So I'll say focus on your balance sheet for a while.
All right. Good starting point. Who's next?
I'll jump in. I would say be open to different types of buyers. I'm always amazed at when we go to market, we might think it's going to be a PE group that's going to step up and put forth the best offer, only to find out that it's a strategic. And they're each going to feel a little bit differently. So whether it's a PE group or another financial sponsor or a strategic, surprisingly, sometimes an individual entrepreneur that's seeking to put himself or herself into a new position through an acquisition. And so just be receptive and be open to having conversations and dialogue with all of them.
That reminds me of a professional services firm that we recently transacted that started off as a sale to an outside party. What was going to be either strategic or private equity, we didn't know. And it ended up as a management buyout. So an internal sale and maybe one external party. So I think it's really just about being flexible. You're going on the process and you're learning essentially how to sell a company. It's something many people only do once, and you're not an expert when you start. But that seller knew enough to know that none of those first 2 options were feeling right. So she looked inside.
Which speaks to assessing different exit pathways. So maybe it's a sell outside, maybe it's an internal, maybe it's an ESOP.
Yeah, and I think those management buyouts work because management understands the numbers. They understand the books and records. And many times, smaller businesses, when they try to go out to market, and mid-sized businesses, they don't even understand their own numbers. And then buyers get confused. And then the MBO or the management buyout makes the most sense because they understand it. And because they understand it, they value it higher than a third party would.
And that's all speaking to the importance of having a plan B. As, developing what is path one. That might be a sell to a private equity fund. That might be a sell to an outside strategic buyer. That might be the internal sale. But also then developing a robust plan B? What if this doesn't work out? That helps you to, during the course of a process, negotiate from a position of strength so you don't feel backed into a corner and like you have to do anything. You always have that alternative. And sometimes that alternative becomes necessary. Or it can develop into being the best option because circumstances change in the macro environment or internal to the business or otherwise. And so really that importance of having a plan B, being open to it, and really investing time in developing what that might look like and being comfortable with it really helps you throughout the full process.
Oh, good. Jenny, you used the word, it didn't feel right. The client you were talking about that wanted to go outside and inside. Trust your instincts. I mean, you can look at balance sheets and SIMs and so forth, and you can do reverse due diligence. If your gut, your instincts are telling you something's off, go with it.
Yeah, that's actually what the seller said to me. This is a great deal on paper, financially. This would be very good for me and my family, but there's something in my gut that is telling me this is not the right deal for me. But from my seat, it looked great, for her, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I think a lesson learned is that you have to be able to take a 2-week vacation as an owner. If you can't go on vacation for 2 weeks, the business is too dependent on you. And I feel like you have to be able to check out and let your management team run and not come back to a collapsed company. And I think that really speaks to developing people and having the right people, because when you're selling a services company, you're selling people. And you have to have a team of people, not just one amazing owner. You need players.
Yeah, and you need to look at that team like a buyer would.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah.
And not just one person that can hit a bunch of home runs or throw a bunch of touchdowns. It's about all the players in the whole organization.
I've always been fascinated in that we prepare our clients with the questions buyers typically ask, right? I can't remember. We have 17 questions or so. But buyers always ask questions that are not on that list. So expect the unexpected question. It's just, I've yet to have a transaction where I anticipated every question that every buyer was going to ask of the seller.
Yeah.
Be prepared to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, we say M&A is about the people, and it is. This is like a TobinLeff mantra, right? M&A is about the people. I think if it is about the people, remember that your legacy is how you treated these people during the sale,
Right.
How you treated your employees, your partners, your shareholders. It's critical. Your family, because it's stressful selling a business,
Right.
and the legacy is not just the financial footprint, but it's also how you made people feel during the process.
And speaking of the process, something we always talk about, lessons learned, is that you will go on an emotional roller coaster when you sell your company. There will be a point in time where you think the deal is not going to get done. That's where your M&A advisors, where the other side's advisors really need to step in and put the deal back together and make sure that it does get done. But it is an absolute emotional roller coaster, and it can be physically exhausting because we will tell you to continue to run your company as if you're not going to sell. And then you basically take on a full-time job of selling your company. And those two things become just physically exhausting, and they add to that emotional roller coaster. So lessons learned, know that you're going to be on this roller coaster. You're going to have frightening moments, but in the end, it'll be a good day.
Guys, being proactive. Somebody touch on that. It's so important. Getting ahead of messaging when news comes up. Who wants to take?
I think it's just don't wait too long to bring in your leadership team to the process. And in fact, I would argue even before you formally decide to sell in an ideal world, so you can engage them. You're not telling them, you're engaging them, and they're part of the process. They're going on this journey with you. That would be optimal. I know it doesn't always work that way, but
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because if you have the entire team working towards the same goal, it makes it easier. And there are going to be surprises along the way. Businesses don't run perfectly flat or even, and there will be ups and downs. And when you get good news or bad news, you want to be in front of the messaging, because sometimes people think, oh, good news, so how can that be bad? Well, good news might be perceived by a buyer that you don't understand your business. And why is there this surprise? And if you can be surprised positively, you can be surprised negatively. So in terms of being proactive, it's on all the messaging that deviates from what you've communicated up front, and you will deviate from what you communicated up front.
and everything comes out during due diligence. You want to message it to your point. You want to be in front of it, whether it's in the marketing materials, the SIM, news comes up. And that goes back to developing relationships with the buyers and their counselors, that you can pick up the phone and say, here's the situation, to be ahead of it.
Yeah. You can't really hide anything during due diligence.
Yeah, and nor should you.
Nor should you. That's right.
Because if you ever try to hide anything, your deal would collapse. So
Absolutely.
Integrity is critical to getting a deal done.
Yeah.
Mary, I've heard you touch on keeping your eye on the prize. You have a few examples of that where, owners could really keep your eye on what's really important.
Yeah, and that's going back to the emotional roller coaster of what happens, of the bumps in the road. When we first meet our clients and throughout the early stages of the process, we're very detailed about what are your goals, desires, and intentions. And Janet spoke to as well, is it the financial element of the deal? Is it the upfront cash? How much? And there's the legacy piece of this, the legacy of all of the relationships involved. Making sure that you're clear about what matters most to you and keeping your eye on that throughout. That's also then, once you've then found the right partner, so whether that's an internal sale, an external sale, you're under LOI, you're in the due diligence process, keeping your eye on what's most important. And this comes to then the importance of an experienced and trusted advisory team. And so my background and training is as an attorney, and I'd like to speak to the role of lawyers in the process here. Lawyers are coming in with their client's best interests at heart, and you'll have two different parties represented with folks looking out for things that are going to protect their client. And you also then will have two parties that want to do a deal and want to get that deal across the finish line. And the more we can focus on what really makes sense here, what's the deal that financially makes sense, structurally makes sense, that's often something that the parties have come to an agreement on, and making sure that small, intricate legal issues don't get in the way of getting an important deal across the finish line is something that's really important. One way in which we've been really helpful there is, for example, Chuck's helped to quantify exactly what that means. We'll look at something that our client's counsel might have raised as an actual risk, but on a $30 million deal, it's a $200,000 issue. And so it's a risk, but is this a risk that we're willing to accept and take here, and putting it in the context of what that overall prize is really important.
A lesson I've come to appreciate, it relates to timing. Everyone knows the saying as relates to M&A, time can kill deals. So you've got to be efficient. You need to be sensitive to time. But there's certain aspects of the process you can't rush. And that's taking the needed time to get to know prospective buyers. Right. And because that's such an important. So you want to be efficient, developing the materials, have deadlines. So it's finding that right balance between developing the relationships and keeping the deal moving.
I couldn't agree more, David. Oftentimes I'll do these analogies where I compare certain aspects of business to a car. You're not selling a car. You're not handing the keys over and walking away. You're getting in that car and you're going to drive around with that buyer for years to come in some shape or form. And so understanding those buyers up front is critical to the long-term happiness of your sale. It's for a guy that just wants to focus on objective numbers, that's when you have to really focus on, even though it's so subjective. It's who do I really want to spend the next couple of years with, because one way or the other, you'll be spending time with them.
Yeah. Be your best self, but be yourself during this process, because eventually they're going to see the real you or the real agency anyway. So you may as well put it all out there and really get to know the vision, the values alignment, if they're really going to be a good fit with your firm. And you're right, that does take time. And it just probably doesn't happen over a Zoom meeting, and probably not even over 2 or 3 meetings. It takes time.
And I think you should have dinner with them. I think you should know who they are. And as crazy as it sounds, you should want to have dinner with them. It shouldn't be a horrible labor. If it is, that's not the right person.
And making sure you speak to other owners that may have sold their companies to that group. I mean, do the reverse due diligence that we do on almost every one of our transactions. Because let's talk about lessons learned around earnout formulas and deal structures. It's No owner wants an earnout if they can avoid it. If you own a service firm, there's that risk post-closing if the founders or the majority shareholders are onto something else, what will happen? And buyers protect with the earnouts. Lessons learned, it goes back to you really need to get to know the buyer. You need to be confident the benchmarks are in your control. Our clients much prefer benchmarks to the top line compared to bottom line because the concern, will they control the P&L? Chuck, what else applies to earnouts?
So I get so frustrated when I see lawyers over-lawyering deals. There's this concept of reps and warranties you'll see down the road, and it's for services companies, it's not that relevant. Where I can't get enough lawyers is on the language surrounding these terms. So in terms of getting a successful deal, make sure it's crystal clear as to the exact terms and how the earnout is calculated. You need to take any subjective nature out of that calculation because you don't want it to be manipulated down the road.
What else have we learned that hopefully the easy way or the hard way helping clients?
Well, I think one is to go back and focus on the growth plan early and up front, because the growth is what's going to help you complete that earnout.
This is before somebody's thinking about selling,
It's
correct?
before, but it comes up even during conversations. What's your plan for scale? What's your plan for growth? And it's amazing how often that question is asked and how few agencies or companies really do have that business development plan buttoned up at the time they go to market.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard you describe the three key...
Right, yeah.
Touch on the three.
Yeah, the firm needs to be transferable, sustainable, and scalable. In any order. It could be sustainable, scalable, and transferable. But that's what every buyer is looking for. So as you get ready to think about going to market, you should have those three components in mind. Are we sustainable? Have we demonstrated a good track record? Can we do more with what we have if a buyer brought additional resources? And then third, are my operations going to transfer into their operations smoothly?
I just had a buyer ask on a call, what would it take for you to a seller? What would it take for you to grow your EBITDA by 3 times in 5 years? And the seller we were a little flat-footed because the question was phrased just a little bit differently. I think we
Right.
did well, but I thought that was a very interesting question and something that we could be thinking about well before.
Yeah.
What would it take to grow this EBITDA by 3 to 5 in 5 years? That's a tall order for a lot of firms.
Yeah, I think another thing that I've noted along the way is that you have to have a forecast that predicts reasonably accurately what you're going to do in the next 12 months. Many different people forecast in different ways. Oftentimes we'll see forecasts that only contain known deals. And then the stuff that just comes along naturally isn't in there. And it completely misses the mark. You can't have that. You have to have a forecast that's going to approximate your financial results. And the critical reason you need that is it makes your business predictable. And if it's predictable, it's understandable.
Education on the front end before somebody commits to an M&A group, especially to go to market. Everybody thinks their homes are worth more than they are. And they typically think their business is even worth more than what they thought their home was worth. And I mean, any M&A or investment banking group, they're going to try to maximize the proceeds because we get paid as they get paid. But you really need to be realistic on what your company's worth. And you have to be careful because if you own a service firm, for example, they'll be talking to their buddies that own
Right.
a tech company or a SaaS company. And they'll say, my multiples are, 15, 10x. And really take the time to understand what is your business worth. Get clear on your expectations and make sure the group that you pick, you believe they can meet them. And somebody's not just trying to say they'll get you a high number to get you to pick that group.
Yeah, because eventually the market will pay what the market will pay. And it's how we distinguish ourselves from the other firms is, some of the services we offer with our subject matter expertise. And it's going to pay what it's going to pay the market. And they could tell you it's worth 10x or 4x. It is what it is, and we'll figure that out. And we mostly know the same buyers out there. It's how we approach the buyers, and it's the credibility that each individual firm has with those buyers. And I know that our firm has very good credibility.
So, guys, we talked about go with your instincts, being proactive, know your numbers, focus on the balance sheet, just not the P&L, the sustainable, transferable, scalable.
Hey, stuck.
Any closing thoughts, recommendations before we wear out our welcome on the podcast timeline?
I would just say, as you keep your eye on the end game, it's nice if you start communicating through the early phases of the process the way you're going to work together after the transaction is closed.
Great. Any closing comments?
I think we laid it all out there. I feel pretty good about our list here today.
I learned something.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening or viewing. You can reach any of us at TobinLeff.com. We're always happy, willing, looking forward to just having discussions with you. We don't charge for that up front. If you want to talk about your business, the M&A marketplace, please find one of the partners at TobinLeff.com. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the TobinLeff M&A podcast, produced by Main Impact with music by Holt Vaughn. For additional resources, case studies, or to contact a partner today, visit TobinLeff.com and be sure to subscribe or sign up for our emails to never miss an episode.